Hello everyone, welcome to the 225 Literary and Jury Charge. We're going to start off with an excerpt from Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and this is on Imagine that everyone is enlightened except you. Here we go, ready? I'm going to read this at 200. Ready? This strategy gives you a chance to practice something that is probably completely unacceptable to you. However, if you give it a try, you might find that it's one of the most helpful exercises in self-improvement. As the title suggests, the idea is to imagine that everyone you know and everyone you meet is perfectly enlightened. That is, everyone except you. The people you meet are all here to teach you something. Perhaps the obnoxious driver or disrespectful teenager is here to teach you about patience. The punk rocker might be here to teach you to be less judgmental. Your job is to try to determine what the people in your life are trying to teach you. You'll find that if you do this, you'll be far less annoyed, bothered, and frustrated by the actions and imperfections of other people. You can actually get yourself in the habit of approaching life in this manner, and if you do, you'll be glad you did. Often, once you discover what someone is trying to teach you, it's easy to let go of your frustration. For example, suppose you are in the post office and the postal clerk appears to be intentionally moving slowly. Rather than feeling frustrated, ask yourself the question, what is he trying to teach me? Maybe you need to learn about compassion, how hard it would be to have a job that you don't like, or perhaps you could learn a little more about being patient. Standing in line is an excellent opportunity to break your habit of feeling impatient. You may be surprised at how fun and easy this is. All you're really doing is changing your perception from why are they doing this to what are they trying to teach me. Take a look around today at all of the enlightened people. All right. Moving right into some jury charge. And the subject here is criminal special circumstances. I will read this at 200. Okay, even though, yeah, well, it is at 200 with the RPR. So, all right, here we go. Ready? Now, you have been instructed also that there are certain special circumstances which have been alleged. These circumstances are set forth in the instruction with respect to special circumstances. There is a special allegation which you were instructed on, and that is that the defendant personally used a firearm in the commission of these offenses, and there is a verdict form with respect to these special circumstances. If you will look at your verdicts, you will see the following special allegations alleged. They are special allegations in this case that the murder was committed by the defendant while the defendant was engaged in the commission of a crime or was engaged in immediate flight after having committed the crime of robbery in violation of the penal code. If you find that to be true, that the murder was committed while the defendant was engaged in the commission of robbery or was engaged in the immediate flight after having committed the crime of robbery, that is a special circumstance. That is a special circumstance that the murder was committed while the defendant was engaged in the commission of a crime or was engaged in immediate flight after having committed the crime of burglary in violation of Penal Code Section 190. Those are two special circumstances or special allegations that you are to find true or not true, and there is a special verdict for those findings. There is a special verdict for your finding of whether the defendant used a firearm in the commission of the crimes. Those are special allegations that were charged against the defendant, along with the charge of murder and the charge of robbery. Now I'm going to read that one more time at 225. Okay, here we go. Ready? Now, you have been instructed also that there are certain special circumstances which have been alleged. These circumstances are set forth in the instruction with respect to special circumstances. There is a special allegation which you were instructed on, and that is that the defendant personally used a firearm in the commission of these offenses, and there is a verdict form with respect to the special circumstances. If you will look at your verdicts, you will see that the following special allegations alleged. They are special allegations in this case that the murder was committed by the defendant while the defendant was engaged in the commission of a crime or was engaged in immediate flight after having committed the crime of robbery in violation of the penal code. If you find that to be true, that the murder was committed while the defendant was engaged in the commission of robbery or was engaged in the immediate flight after having committed the crime of robbery, that is a special circumstance. circumstance. That is a special circumstance that the murder was committed while the defendant was engaged in the commission of a crime or was engaged in immediate flight after having committed the crime of burglary in violation of Penal Code Section 190. Those are two special circumstances or special allegations that you are to find true or not true, and there is a special verdict for those findings. There is a special verdict for your finding of whether the defendant used a firearm in the commission of the crimes. Those are special allegations that were charged against the defendant, along with the charge of murder and the charge of robbery. All right. I've got some literary here, and the subject is bankruptcy. So here is your word list. Debtor, bankruptcy, and I like to write that as B-A-R-P-T. Financial, liquidation, ruined, reestablishing, initiating, claims, accounting, moral, wife, supervise, priority, secured, petition, assets, liabilities, mortgages. And I will read this at 200. Ready? A debtor may wish to seek release from the liability of payment for his debts. This may be accomplished by initiating voluntary bankruptcy proceedings. The petition for bankruptcy is granted if the court finds that the debtor is unable to pay his debts. Most states require the debtor to submit a complete accounting of his assets and liabilities. Some states also require the financial background on persons closely associated with the debtor, his wife, children, business partner, etc. In the bankruptcy proceedings, the court will closely supervise the liquidation of all assets. Some states permit the debtor to retain certain assets if it can be proven that they are necessary for daily living. The court will recognize the claims by priority as follows. First, several claims such as mortgages. Second, priority claims such as taxes. And third, unsecured claims. Bankruptcy is a legal discharge from debts, but a moral obligation remains. The debtor will find that his credit standing is ruined. In most cases and states, the debtor is required to wait anywhere from 3 to 10 years before reestablishing his former credit standing. Right. Moving right into our next segment. I've got an article here, and this is called Golf and Court Reporting, Control is Fundamental. All right. I'm going to read this at 180. Okay, it's literary, so. All right, here we go. In the world of court reporting, we constantly think about new outlines, decide how best to stroke those outlines, and then edit our untranslated steno. In the great game of golf, we constantly decide on what club to use, how to execute the proper shot, and then deal with the consequences of how the ball lies. Golf is so much like reporting. In golf, you might get frustrated or upset by things such as inclement weather, slow play, or you're just playing poorly that day. You might become distracted by bad etiquette on the part of other players or difficult course conditions. In reporting, you might become frustrated by inadequate acoustics, a poorly controlled deposition or hearing, or people speaking at the same time, or just too quickly. Likewise, deciphering a heavy accent, hitting your ball in a sand trap, or understanding a poor speech pattern requires strength of mind to persevere. In golf, you take responsibility for managing your game. To reach your full potential as a golfer, you must determine what some of the numerous factors are that you can control. Similarly, to reach your full potential as a reporter, you have to understand what elements in your environment you can or cannot control. The ability to focus on what you can control and let go of what you cannot is very important in golf and reporting. The discipline required is something that must be acquired. The simple awareness of focusing on the situation and the job at hand is the difference between going through the motions of just taking the words down versus taking pride in accomplishing a job well done. The product or service you're providing should be something you can be confident and proud of. Know that you're putting your best out there and making the most of the situation. The circumstances are always going to change. Every day you go on a job or go out to play golf, No, there will be many variables that you have to deal with. It's learning how you deal with them that makes the difference. It's the attitude you bring to your job or to your game that will alter your feelings of accomplishment or enjoyment. To do anything well in life, it is important to match up your intentions with your attention. It is easy to get distracted and lose sight of your target. Learn to be in command of those things that you can control and look past the things that you cannot. If you stay focused, you will see better results. All right, now I'm going to read you a little side note here. This is called Fundamentals for Focusing. Attitude. Learn to control it and direct your energy positively. Work toward always improving your translation rate and have an objective to become real-time ready and obtain NCRA and state certifications. Concentration. Filter out extraneous thoughts and distracting sounds while writing on the job. Mental energy. Be mentally prepared and you will be physically prepared. Rest. Maintain good nutrition and exercise regularly to achieve mental agility. Rhythm. Are you having a good day or a bad day? Warm up and find your rhythm. Practice the alphabet before each job. Theory. Constantly refine your writing principles. Learn new outlines slowly so they work for you, not against you. Think in your seat. Be alert and pay attention to real-time translation. Add brief forms or shorten multi-syllabic words or phrases on the job. Mental writing. Envision outlines when you hear new words, whether you are reading the newspaper or listening to the radio. Vocabulary building. Learn new words and take time to check out their definitions. You will enjoy the long-term cumulative results of your efforts. Computer preoccupation. Don't be preoccupied with software. Your primary job is to be a reporter. Find your writing zone and clean writing will come. Clarification. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It is far better to clarify a word you weren't sure about on the job than to worry about it later. Being inquisitive is a sign of intelligence. All right, great article there. Got some jury charge, and the subject is the authority of an agent. All right. Here we go. Ready? I'm going to read this at 200. The powers of agents are limited, generally speaking, when an agent is appointed for a particular purpose and is authorized to do certain acts. The liability of the principal for such acts depends first upon the power actually conferred, second, the power reasonably necessary for the execution of those powers which are actually conferred, third, the powers annexed by custom or usage, that is, such powers as the agent was accustomed to exercise for the company and permitted to exercise for it, and fourth, the powers in addition thereto, which the principal by his words or conduct would lead third persons reasonably to believe that the agent possesses. An agent has implied authority to do whatever is reasonably necessary to carry out his express authority. It arises out of the authority expressly conferred. A principal is presumed to have conferred all auxiliary authority reasonably necessary to make the express authority effective. The term implied authority is sometimes used to denote such authority as the principal in fact intends that the agent shall have, where such intention is shown by his conduct rather than his words. The intention of the parties is the real test. A principal is bound by the acts of his agent within the apparent authority which the principal knowingly or negligently permits the agent to assume, or which he holds the agent out as possessing. All such acts are within the apparent scope of the authority conferred are binding upon the principal, apparent authority being that which, though not actually granted, the principal knowingly permits the agent to exercise, or which he holds him out as possessing. Wherever a principal on such authority as he appears to have by reason of the actual authority conferred has placed an agent in such a position or situation that a person of ordinary prudence is justified in assuming that such agent is authorized to perform a particular act on behalf of his principal, and such particular act has been performed, the principal is estopped to deny the agent's authority to perform it. Furthermore, the principal will not be permitted to prove that the agent's authority was in fact less extensive than that with which he was apparently clothed. Although a party dealing with an agent must prove that the facts giving color to his agency were known to him when he dealt with the agent, he must prove that the agent was acting within the apparent scope of his authority and that he knew the facts giving rise to such apparent authority. Right. How are we doing on time? 15, about 5 minutes. Okay. I'm going to read a little bit about the Bodie State Historic Park. We started that in one of the other high-speed classes, so I'm going to do a continuation. This is explaining all of the different buildings that are left and what is like some of the history on each one of them. Okay, here we go. The schoolhouse, originally the Bon Ton Lodging House. This became a school after the first school was allegedly burned down by an early-day juvenile delinquent in 1879 through 1880. The school saw its highest enrollment of 615 students. It closed in 1942. Number 21, the Gregory House. Nathan Gregory operated a cattle ranch between Bodie and Aurora. He and his wife Catherine appear on the 1900 census with 4 children. Their youngest son, Spencer, became a mining engineer and was one of Bodie's last residents. Optional side trip. Just behind the Gregory House to the south, you can see the Fouke House. Annie C. Fouke, wife of Richard Fouke, is buried in Bodie Cemetery. She came to Bodie at age 23 from her native Denmark to visit her sister. During the visit, she met and fell in love with Richard. Annie died shortly after giving birth to their 3rd daughter. Number 22, McMillan House. A.E. McMillan was the secretary of Bodie's Miners Union in 1885. His son Dan, who had only one arm, was manager of the Bodie baseball team in the early 1900s. Number 23, Miller Boarding House. Minnesota native Annie Curry Miller moved to Bodie in the boom years with her miner husband, William. She first ran the Occidental Hotel, then later opened this boarding house to provide rooms and meals for bachelor miners. She also owned the rooming house across the street. Number 24, Conway House. Thomas Robert Bob Conway, born in Canada in 1875, lived there with his wife Annie and 3 children. The family lived first in the Todd House across the street. Bob was one of Bodie's last residents. In the boom years, Bob's cousins, John and Patrick Conway, ran freight wagons between Bodie and Carson City, Nevada. John also worked as a blacksmith. The hops growing on the porch railing were said to be the only green plants that could survive in Bodie. Optional side trip. Across the street from the Conway House is the Todd House. James Todd, a miner, lived here in the 1900s. Uphill at the fork, the small building is known by the nickname of its last residence, Dog-Faced George, or last resident, Dog-Faced George. At the top of the hill is the McInnes House. Canadian Roderick McInnes was a miner known for his wrestling talents. He and his wife, Mary, had 4 children. Number 25, Dr. Street's house. Dr. John A. Street was a physician for the Treadwell Yukon Mining Company between December 1930 and January 1932. In Bodie's boom years, a number of doctors in private practice were kept busy with victims of mining accidents, smallpox, cholera, and pneumonia. Number 26, Quinville House. Frank F. Quinville, a Canadian native, moved to Bodie in the 1880s. He was a blacksmith for the Standard Mine and Mill well into the early 1900s. He and his wife Mary had 5 children. Number 27, Standard Mill. Because the mill buildings and surrounding areas are unsafe, access to the mill is available only by guided tour in the summer months. This is the Standard Consolidated Milling Company Stamp Mill, or Mining Company Stamp Mill. The Standard was the most successful of 30 mining companies operating in the Bodie mining district. Heavy iron rods known as stamps broke up quartz rock containing gold and silver. Mercury and later cyanide was used to separate the metals from the crushed rock. The Standard Mine, located on the hill above, was first known as the Bunker Hill and the Bullion Mine. A mine collapse in 1875 revealed a rich ore vein and started the rush to Bodie. The mine was renamed the Standard in 1877 and yielded more than $18 million over 38 years. This mill was built in 1899 after the 1898 fire that destroyed the original building. In 1893, Superintendent Thomas Leggett brought electricity to power the mill from a hydroelectric plant about 13 miles away, one of the first long-distance transmissions of the alternating current in the United States. The house to the right with the large porch is named for another Standard superintendent, Theodore Hoover, brother of U.S. President Herbert Hoover. Theodore, his wife Mildred, and their younger daughter lived in Bodie from June 1903 to January 1906. He later became executive head of the Department of Mining at his alma mater, Stanford University, in 1919. Optional side trip. Uphill east of Wood Street is the Burkham House with an elegant bay window. Cecil Burkham ran automobile stages between Bodie and Hawthorne in the early 1900s. Number 28, U.S. Hotel and Occidental Hotel sites. On the east side of the main street stood the U.S. Hotel to the north and the Occidental Hotel to the south. Ruins of a stone warehouse and the Occidental stable across the creek are all that remain. Only a stone sidewalk marks the site of the U.S. Hotel. Imagine how this corner looked when the main street was a solid mile of 1- and 2-story frame buildings. People who walked this busy street came from all over the world. Records show residents from Italy, Ireland, England, Mexico, France, Germany, Canada, and elsewhere. In 1880, 16 African Americans appeared on the census. Their occupations included hairdresser, barber, waiter, cook, laundry worker, and miner. In April 1880, the death of one of Bodie's most well-known African Americans was reported in the Daily Bodie Standard newspaper. William O'Hara, known as Uncle Billy to many, had come to Bodie in 1863. For many years, he ran the boarding house of the Empire Mining Company. It was reported that he acquired the property of what would later be known as the Standard Mine because of a debt that was owed to him. He tried to sell it, but mining experts told him the property was worthless. He finally resold the property to the previous owner back for $8,000. All right, so that concludes our literary and jury charge for the 225 class.